ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Jake Talks Capes. Welcome to episode 3 of Fans Casting. I'm once again joined by the lovely Ewan, and we're here to talk about the villains. Oh, it's time to talk about the villains. I can't wait.
I'm buzzing. Do you know what? It feels like I'm becoming a bit of a permanent co-host here, and that's not legal, but I'm just manifesting that now because I would happily be on here to do every single one, because some of these castings I've had to like save actors for other franchises, so hopefully this becomes a whole merchandising conglomerate.
Yeah, we're always just we'll just be printing t-shirts with like it's just Mark Strong's head on Professor X in the wheelchair.
It's just like
just really bad.
It gets to a point
Photoshops.
Eventually where we start doing like 3-hour-long fan fiction videos where we write the entire script for every film in our universe
with stage directions and everything.
Yeah, literally. I think that would be brilliant. I think.
But we're here to talk about the villains. I think I'm going to be honest. So X-Men was up until maybe like a year ago. X-Men was kind of my Marvel blind spot. I was kind of raised reading Spider-Man and Fantastic Four like, more than I would read X-Men. And it was about maybe a year or two ago, I was like, X-Men are kind of fucking cool. And then I locked in.
Yeah. So for me, I was kind of raised on the Avengers, but I always thought that the X-Men and Fantastic Four were cooler. I was a very based kid. In my head, like ever since I've been like 9, I've been like, yeah, the X-Men and Fantastic Four are actually cooler, but they've just never had good films made about them, so the general public don't really know that. So, you know, I was pretty based from the outset.
It's like, because for me as a kid, when I was reading the comics growing up, like, obviously I'm a few years older than you, so like when I was kind of coming into comics, it was around about, you know, when I would get the odd comic here and there from, you know, usually the Tesco and Falkirk, it was like X-Men, Fantastic Four, Spider-Man, and if you ever saw an Avengers one, because up until, you know, 2012, the Avengers was the B-team jobber team, and then all those movies made all that money, and now everyone sees that as the main Marvel team. But like I say, I think X-Men was kind of my blind spot. And then the more I started reading, the more it became clear that not only is it like obviously like some of the best comics ever, I think the X-Men Rogues Gallery has a case to be better than Batman's, who is like obviously famous for having the best Rogues Gallery in comics.
Is that I would probably, I can't lie, I think I disagree. You know, I was like, I love the X-Men, but for me, I think my thing for like with the X-Men, for me, it's more about the storylines and like the relationship between the characters. I've never been that attached to like. Obviously, you've got like the major ones like Magneto, Apocalypse, and you've got kind of some of the side villains. But I've never really felt like the X-Men has like that crazy of a rogue gallery. Like it's definitely not as open and as widespread and as vast as like characters like Spider-Man and characters.
See, I think for me, the reason I think I like it so much is because it's a team, you can kind of do more with that. I think. I mean, obviously, the most compelling villains to most heroes are that villain, or that hero, but something. So like Venom is Spider-Man, but evil. Yeah. Like, you know what I mean? It's like you look at Batman, you have like, you know, you've got Joker and Scarecrow and all these other villains that are like reflections of one singular person. But what I really like about the X-Men or the X-Men villains in particular, is you don't really have a lot of that. Obviously, you've got a Sabretooth, you've got a Magneto, you've got people like that, but I think someone like Stryker, who, whether he's General Stryker or Reverend Stryker, his sole purpose in life is just to destroy mutant life. That's just so interesting to me.
For me, the big thing with kind of the X-Men Rogue Gallery is that I think a lot of it kind of interchanges with each other. I think a lot of these guys, like, you could do like X-Men stories where like Magneto, you can see how Magneto and William Stryker would be directly connected, and then how that would maybe bring in the idea of Mr. Sinister and Apocalypse, and you kind of like all these villains are so connected. For me, with the X-Men villains, maybe there's not enough like one person, big world-ending villains for me with the X-Men. Maybe it's like,
yeah,
because you see the Avengers and they'll fight Ultron or Loki, and they're these big villains, and it's like maybe, the X-Men kind of have that, but a lot of those villains have kind of other players going on. I would like to maybe see like another huge mainline X-Men villain come out.
I think to echo off that, I think a reason I particularly like someone like Stryker is that while Stryker might not be a threat to the entire world, Stryker's entire message is a threat to mutants on either side of the coin, on the X-Men or the Brotherhood and the Hellfire Club and all these people. He doesn't care, and I really like that. I really like the fact that whilst their stakes may seem smaller when you compare it to the world-ending stakes of like a Doom or a Kang, with a villain like Stryker seeks out to just erase what makes these people special.
Yeah.
And I really, really like that.
Like a big part of the X-Men for me, I think, is like obviously the political stuff and the kind of, I suppose, like the woke stuff, if you want to call it that, is obviously always been a big part of it. And I think a lot of people kind of tend to focus a lot with the X-Men on maybe like the gender and racial like analogies with that. And I think, that's a cool way to focus on it in terms of like the X-Men point of view, like as the characters themselves. But I think a lot of like the really interesting stuff with the X-Men comes from the more like direct politics stuff, like the geopolitical stuff, and like the idea that there are these mutant guys that are happy just getting along with humans, and the whole idea that there are going to be mutants that do think that they're better, and the idea of like having mutants that are essentially terrorists and stuff like that. I think that's always been like what's fascinated me about like X-Men villains, is the ideas that are like any of these guys could be just wanting to wipe out the mutants. Any of these guys could just be like a general bad guy, but you're always going to have one who maybe might, the idea of like having stories where we could see a villain try and maybe scapegoat the mutants. Like, I love that idea of like this whole like the radicalism aspect of it.
Yeah, and I think as well to piggyback off the back of that is because a lot of the villains are mutants. It also opens it up for such an interesting dynamic for people to go either way. Either if it is someone like an Emma Frost, who we'll touch on, who kind of eventually realises that this isn't the way to go about having mutants all over the world live a decent life day to day, or if it's someone like Angel, who we presume is dead. Apocalypse finds him and goes, humans will never ever accept you. I think it's good because it's going to be very tricky with most comic book, IPs for a hero to be swayed over to the villain side, because a lot of them are. Yeah,
I think with the X-Men stuff, it's so easy to do that. It's like you can really soap opera the hell out of it.
Which is why I think I think like the X-Men Rogues Gallery is so interesting, and why for me I would say I don't know if I would definitively put it ahead of Batman for me, but I do think it is easily Spider-Man's got a good Rogues Gallery, but I would say it's Marvel's best Rogues Gallery.
Yeah. So, do you want to start off?
So we can't talk about the villains without talking about Magneto. Magneto is probably, maybe the most interesting comic book character of all time, like regardless of Marvel, DC, hero, villain, whatever. Probably the most interesting character of all time. There's obviously been a lot of debate online about, do we need to keep the Jewish heritage? Do we need to cast a Jewish actor? I say yes, purely because he's the highest profile Jewish character of all time. His story is entirely tied to his trauma of his childhood in a death camp during the Holocaust. And also, it's a comic book movie. He has magnets in his blood, so he ages slower, or he fell through a time portal, or you can do any number of things. But I think for me, casting a Jewish actor was very important. So I looked at exclusively Jewish actors. I have a couple of names here that aren't, and they're my kind of ones for, I understand that some people think maybe he should feel more like a 60s civil rights leader. I have a couple of names there, but I think the main things for me with Magneto is he's got to feel. You need to believe that so many people would want to do it his way as opposed to Xavier's way. You need to feel the pain of that backstory. You need to feel the tragedy in it, and you need to know. You need to feel like that presence. And I think, see, for as much flack as X-Men 3, X3, Last Stand, or whatever its official title is, gets, it's got the moment that just perfectly encapsulates Magneto for me, and that is obviously when the mutants ask him why he doesn't have the tattoos so people know he's a mutant, and he points to the tattoo he was given in the camps and says, "A needle touched my skin once, my dear, and I made a promise no needle would ever touch it again." That's perfect Magneto right there. I also think whoever comes in needs to be an acting powerhouse, because we had Ian McKellen and Michael Fassbender.
Yeah. So, for me, on the Jewish actor thing, now, originally, my whole thing was, obviously, if we're doing the Holocaust as Magneto's backstory, bro would have to be, 84 years old, and that's, that's if this comes out in 2025, which it absolutely isn't. So that's a big deal for me. But then when you kind of mentioned maybe some ways to write it out, I thought, okay, it's maybe more doable. But I hadn't thought about that, to be honest. So I've not gone with a Jewish actor, and I've basically gone with the idea that we can choose another, just any number of genocides or protests that have happened at some point between the 60s and 80s. There's got to be any number of things. You could Vietnam, civil rights, just any of that stuff. There's got to be something.
Like I say, I have 3 actors in there that I think would be a lot of fun if we went down the sort of American civil rights movement.
Yeah, so a big one. I've always said ever since, I've always said for years, I like the idea of civil rights Magneto, and I've not gone with that. That's not the idea I've gone with, but I've always said if it wasn't for this actor, a Morgan Freeman or a Giancarlo Esposito would be a fun route that I would take that. But that's not where I've gone.
Esposito was one of the three African American names I have. Well, I know Esposito is more South American, but one of the 3 names I went for if we were to go down that route. Age-wise, I'm looking at guys ideally 50s, 60s, because that's where that's where Ray Fiennes, that's where my Charles is.
Yeah, I've got Mark Strong, so I'm in a similar place. The other thing is more specific to Magneto than Xavier. I want to see hot long hair, sexy Magneto from X-Men '97, because we've not had that yet. We felt like Fassbender was don't get me wrong, good looking bloke, but I really want to see just ripped long hair, just this absolute silver fox Magneto.
When I think about maybe this gives it away who mine is. When you say Magneto with the long silver hair, it just makes me chuckle, because that is playing a character with long silver hair is who my choice is most famous for.
Interesting. So I don't know why I'm trying to guess. I'm not. Yeah. Okay. Go for it. So.
Okay.
Like I said, my 2 runners up were Freeman and Giancarlo Esposito. I think I could I think Freeman's way too old to do it, but I think if they had Freeman, I would have loved to see Freeman. Obviously Ian McKellen's great, but if they, in the 2000s when they were casting the original one, I would have loved to see Freeman in those films. Freeman's voice delivering some of those lines would have been incredible. I think
Freeman's a name that is one of the people that as you say, has just aged out.
Yeah.
He's he for me is an Apocalypse who's aged out.
My Apocalypse pick's actually kind of young.
Mine is... How old is mine?
My Apocalypse is just basically the same age as my X-Men.
Yeah, mine's a little bit older. Right. But I couldn't pick anyone else. So my runners-up, like I say, if we want to go down the sort of African-American civil rights leader, I have 3 names here. And I'm pretty sure I had all three of these names in my Xavier cast. Let me look. I did have all three of these names in my Xavier cast because they're two sides of the same coin, and you kind of want a lot of what you look for in Xavier and Magneto. So those three names, if we were to go down that route, were Sterling K. Brown, Giancarlo Esposito, and Coleman Domingo. But like I said, for me, I feel like a Jewish actor was kind of what I was looking for. So my three runners-up, who are all Jewish actors, I think Joaquin Phoenix would be a lot of fun here. Although I just don't think Twitter would be really annoying if Joker from the movie Joker was also Magneto.
Yeah, and I just also I can't lie, as good as he is as an actor, I just don't like Joaquin Phoenix I just think he kind of maybe has a tendency to take things a bit too seriously. Yeah, and I get that Magneto's like a serious guy, and like you need to be a bit, but I also believe I do think I think my favourite stuff, whenever you watch the animated series, the best stuff with Magneto is when he's kind of just dicking around, being a bit cheeky. You know, like the stuff like, I don't want to say too much because I know you've not seen it, but there's some like scenes where he's kind of with Rogue and he's just like having a laugh and he's not mega serious, and I like that stuff. Well,
mine is also, my number one is kind of can do that. If we're looking at, if we do want to go mega serious, and if for whatever reason one of the most prestiged actors of all time decided he wanted to play a comic book villain, can you imagine if Daniel Day-Lewis was Magneto?
That was fun.
I think obviously Daniel Day-Lewis is too prestige for this, but it would slap. My other runner-up, if we want to go a little bit, not necessarily more light-hearted, but can kind of play that less serious and can be a little bit more fun and not always on. David Duchovny from the X-Files, I think, would be a lot of fun here. He's around about the right age.
Okay. So
but my number one...
Go for it.
My number one... Sometimes you look online and people are like saying, oh, it should be this guy to play it. And, you know, sometimes you look at that and you're like, oh, I don't really get that. I don't really see that. But sometimes the internet and Twitter picks the perfect person, and it just, ever since I saw it and I thought about it, he is perfect for it. And as I mentioned, he's probably most famous for playing a man with long grey hair and some evil tendencies in him. I've gone for Jason Isaacs. He was Malfoy's dad in the Harry Potter movies. He was in The Death of Stalin. I think he's one of the most underrated actors about right now. And in the right age range,
cool.
Jewish.
That's actually fun. That's fun.
And I think he's fucking unbelievable. And we know he looks good with a big long grey wig.
Yeah, actually I like that a lot. Yeah, I like that a lot. So I've actually just got, I really have just gone sexy, someone that we can just, someone that's a bit of a daddy, you know?
You've gone for a silver fox?
A little bit of a silver fox, if I'm honest. This guy, he's like I said, similar age range to Mark Strong, maybe a little bit older. But for me, I don't know what people think about this guy. I can't. Part of me feels like this guy's a bit of a meme. For some reason, I wouldn't know why. The only thing I've ever seen him in is The Lord of the Rings. I've gone Viggo Mortensen.
Oh,
I think he.
Yeah,
looks,
I like that.
Could you imagine him with the long hair, doing that, the long wavy hair, doing the Magneto thing, man? He's got that firm chin. There. Do you know what I mean? He's got that chiseled jawline. So
you need that for the big helmet as well. You need a strong chin.
Yeah, absolutely. I like.
Viggo's a good shout. I could get on board with that. I definitely could.
Maybe they could do do a Cold War Magneto, and have that be the thing. Just have him be a victim, or just of the fallout of the Cold War. Yeah. I think that could maybe be a fun route to take it down.
Like I say, I think for me, because he's kind of the most high profile one, but I also think because, for me anyway, Jason Isaacs is just the perfect one.
Another big thing for me, another big thing for me with this Magneto is I definitely want to see him be more villainous. I feel in the films we've had a lot of kind of tortured anti-hero that's like is the villain of those films, but like is very much when meant to side with him. Whereas I feel like I definitely want to see him like on the X-Men helping out at some points, contributing and like kind of being that person that kind of throws off the dynamic and everyone's like, what is this guy's play? Like what's his intentions here?
But I think to get there we need to just see him be outright evil.
Exactly, yeah. So
for that to be effective, he needs to be...
We've had a lot of like moral ambiguity from Magnetos in the past. I feel like this time I don't want moral ambiguity. I just want him to be like, rather than just play in the middle and kind of flip-flop in between, I want him to be just very firmly evil and have his moments where he's just helping out on the X-Men and, you know, have him be that character that comes into the X-Men and throws off the dynamic and everyone's kind of like...
The main thing for that is when his status as the most powerful sort of... when his status as the head of like mutant resistance and rebellion and warfare, only really when that's challenged. So like he comes in when Apocalypse is there.
Yeah.
You know, he doesn't come in out of any real change of heart. He comes in because Apocalypse upsets the status quo and upsets everything he's built. Like
I said, I don't know if I mentioned it, but I've got some kind of big character changes for Apocalypse in this. I'll talk through them, and they kind of directly relate to how I want my Magneto to be portrayed. But yeah, Magneto, I just want to get him to see... I just want to see him engaging in some real dastardly behaviour, man. I want to see him hitting some devious licks.
So if we're talking about Magneto, we need to talk about his right-hand woman. We need to talk about Mystique.
His side piece.
Mystique is, for me, characterised as a survivor. I don't think Mystique is inherently good or inherently evil. Mystique does whatever she needs to do in order to ensure that she will see another day. Whether that's selling out mutant kind, whether that's selling out the Brotherhood, whether that's, you know, killing students at the school if she has to. She
to piggyback,
survives.
Yeah, to kind of piggyback off that, I need less, because we've seen a lot of like Mystique in the previous X-Men films. There was like, it kind of became the whole issue with the X-Men films was just the overuse of Mystique, and obviously she's fun to have around, but for me Mystique is very much like a plot thing. Like Mystique to me feels like she works best as like a plot device rather than a focal point.
I would agree, and I think as well a thing with Mystique is one thing that I don't really feel the films utilised so well with both iterations. Obviously they had their moments, but one big thing that characterises Mystique is that Mystique knows she is, you know, I mean obviously she's a shapeshifter, so if she wants to be, she is, you know, the most gorgeous woman in the world, and usually typically when she's not in, when she is going out and about and blending in, she typically chooses to be one of the most stunning women in the world, and she's got to love the attention, and she's got to know that whether she's looking for it or not, she is the centre of attention, and know that and revel in that and use that to her advantage.
Yeah, so...
And I don't think we really saw a lot of that with her.
I think... so I don't think it's crucial. It's not like a big crucial thing for me, like, that Mystique is like that we get like an ultimate baddie for Mystique. Like, you know, like when some people would suggest that you just gotta go with like the hottest possible girl in Hollywood. I don't think that's as much as like a... I don't think it's not as crucial for Mystique as it would be for like an Emma Frost or a Psylocke. Yeah. I think you can kind of get away with someone that can like carry it a bit more and actually do a bit of a job.
I think with that though as well, like, I mean, everyone I've looked at for Mystique is, you know, an absolute fucking just
absolutely.
Stunning
like naturally, you're going to go down that route.
But I think as well they all need to have a sort of physical charisma.
Yeah,
if that makes sense. Yeah. They need to have like a presence with the way that they carry themselves, and I've got it down to two who absolutely have. I think
we've probably picked the same person. You know, I think that if any of these were most likely to pick the same person, I think that it'll be this one. But basically, my last point is that like in all the films so far, we very much had this Mystique that's like very like tortured character, and she's very central and she's very involved. and kind of she's this person that a lot of the mutants kind of look up to, and they all know who she is. She's like a celebrity in mutant kind, whereas I feel like Mystique really should be utilised as this plot device. She is like... Mystique is a complete cheat code for the writers, right? You can do some crazy, just absolutely mental things that like really don't make any sense and kind of are just very convenient, but like that is where I think Mystique works best, is just as a convenience thing that you can do mad shit with and make people go, I can't believe they've done that. And I think like she's a main, like for me, Mystique needs to be really characterized as like, if she's going to be more involved, Mystique needs to come across as just this absolute bad bitch and like just this cool mum. Like I really want to see this kind of maternal side of Mystique, that's like had to make some horrible decisions throughout her life in order like as a mother, but like I also don't want that to be a central focus. I think if at any point we do like want Mystique to be a big focus, I think that should be in a Nightcrawler solo film. I would love to see like Mystique be like an important part of a Nightcrawler solo film, but apart from that, I think she very much is just like a plot device to have weird scenes.
And one thing for me, that's why I'm just currently looking at the ages of all of my actors here.
I would also like to see Mystique torment the X-Men a little bit more, because I don't think we've really seen much of that in the films. Like you see her tormenting like government guys and like sneaking around government places, but like I want to see Mystique kind of, you know, like in the animated series where there's the one episode where Morph is, I think Mr. Sinister kidnaps Morph, and Morph's like running around the X-Mansion turning into all the different X-Men and like drawing them to different places, so he like turn into Gambit and tell Rogue to go somewhere, and I'd love to see Mystique having like some stuff like that.
Yeah, I think, like I say, I don't think she's been used properly, and I also think she has been overexposed as to what you said. My one final thing for Mystique, she's just got to feel believably old enough than my Nightcrawler, because that's obviously her son.
Oh shit, I didn't even think about that.
So Sonny Solich is, I don't know, obviously she's a shapeshifter, but like I want someone that like feels like they could, you know, like sort of help guide Kurt or lead him astray.
Okay, maybe we've not gone to the same person then.
No, so mine are all... So all of my 4 picks are 36 and 37. I think one might be 39. But they're all under 40. But Sonny Solich, you know, I mean, he's like 20. So it's not really a big deal. But we'll go in. I'll drop my 2 runners up, even though I've got 3 runners up. I'll drop the 2 that I'm less excited about, because there are 2 up top who I'm very excited about, and I could take either one. And if we have the same one for one of them, then I'll just give you...
There's
I'll
potentially
you,
one of these B. I think one of these B options is absolutely... We definitely like got a B option shared here.
So my 2 runners up that I'm less excited about, not less excited about, that seems, I'm very, very excited about my 1A and 1B. So my 2 runners up would be Abby Lee Kershaw.
Okay.
She's like an Australian model, kind of has that presence, and also has like she's obviously incredibly pretty, but has a very interesting face.
Okay.
Which I also kind of looked at for Mystique, because you kind of want her to stand out under all that makeup. Then my other runner-up is Evan Rachel Wood, who I think
that's
great.
A really good shout, actually.
I've seen a lot of people saying Megan Fox. I don't think she's a particularly great actor.
I'll touch on that, because Megan Fox was my B option. So
that's what I'm saying. I think she's a good shout for if we're not using her as prominently as Fox did.
Yeah.
I just think if you do ever do a story where she may need to be more prominent, her acting abilities may be sort of sussed out.
So for me, the thing with Megan Fox, the reason I do really rate her for this is because I think she's got the maternal thing down, and I think if you do want to go with the idea of like her being a mother to Kurt, I think Megan Fox can probably really sell that. I think I think controversially, I'm going to be a bit controversial, I think Megan Fox has been done quite dirty by the film industry, because
Oh yeah, big time.
Like, if you look back at everything that she's been in, even going back to Transformers, like, she's the best in those films.
Yeah.
Like, Megan Fox is absolutely...
She's a real highlight in those early Transformers.
Yeah, she's... And not even from a place of, like, she's nice to look at, but, like, I always think back to that scene where they're in the car and Simmons kind of gives the kids a dressing down, and he talks to Michaela about, like, her dad going to prison and stuff, and she sells the shit out of that scene probably more than anyone in that whole franchise sells any scene. I think she's absolutely the best person in it, and I think Hollywood's kind of done her dirty. Not only that, obviously, like I said, I think she can sell the maternal thing, and I just want to see her in more things, because, like, after Transformers and Jennifer's Body and all those kind of things, obviously she stuck on with Bay and did, like, the Ninja Turtles films, and I just don't think... In those Ninja Turtles films, there's a few scenes where she's got to do, like, espionage stuff as well, so I think that's why she's a fun... Like, I think that probably adds to it.
I'm a big Ninja Turtles guy, and I absolutely fucking hate those films.
Yeah, they're not good films, but, like, basically...
So I unfairly maybe hold that against her.
Yeah, so for me, basically, Megan Fox just has all the right traits, where she can, like, absolutely can sell the motherly thing. She is... like, absolutely stunning, and she's just, like, she can sell the espionage thing, and I could believe that she would have, like, that presence that Mystique has. My issue with Megan Fox that makes her... Well, I've got two issues, actually, that make her my B pick. First is that there's another character in another franchise that I think she's absolutely perfect for, and I don't want to waste her here. The second reason is because I think if you've got someone like Megan Fox, if you've got someone as, like, unreal to look at as Megan Fox, it almost, like, you're almost asking to not put her under the makeup, and I definitely want to see more Mystique under the makeup this time round. We need to see Mystique be a bit more blue, and I think with Megan Fox you're kind of sacrificing that.
And I think as well, it's not even necessarily as much as it is, you know, if you get someone as good looking as Megan Fox and you don't want her under all the makeup, but I also think she may be a little bit too big of a star. Do you know what I mean?
Not even that. I think no, but, like, I don't think she's a star in the way that, like, you'd say, like, Florence Pugh's a star because people love her.
I'm not saying that, like, she herself would be like, no, I'm not doing that. But I think it's, like, kind of in the way.
No, that's what I mean. Like, she'd be too recognisable. Yeah. But I think so. For me, the reason that I don't mind that is because, like, if it was a Florence Pugh, like, she's recognised and people love her. Like, people just absolutely love Florence Pugh. Whereas I think Megan Fox is a bit more like... Megan Fox, I think the general opinion on her isn't very positive, so I think you could probably get away with putting her in that makeup, and I don't think people are attached enough to her to the point where that's really going to take them out. They'll just be like, oh, this is like a fun piece of novelty to see Megan Fox in something that, like, I've not seen her in something in a while. That's why that works for me. But yeah, mainly, like, I'm saving her for something else, and I also think, like, I also just don't think she'd maybe look right under that makeup. I don't know if it'd look right.
My two, like I say, I've got 1A and 1B.
Yeah.
Looking at them now, okay, I'm going to officially say 1B. I'm going to officially pick a 1B, which I guess means I've picked the runner-up, and I guess that means I've picked one.
No, I think we have picked the same person, actually. I just googled my person's age. I thought they were younger.
Okay, so my 1B is Ana de Armas.
Is that your 1B? Wait, so you've got two options you haven't decided?
I think she'll be 1B, which means I like her just a tiny, tiny, tiny bit less than my other one. But also, if we have the same one, then I'm just going to claim her as my pick so I can get both of them on the screen.
Yeah.
So my 1B, which she's lost by, like, a ball hair, is Ana de Armas. I absolutely love her. I think she's a fantastic actress. She has that sort of physical charisma down where you can't take your eyes off her. I think she can do the wallflower thing really well. We saw that in Knives Out. She can do the centre of attention thing really well. We saw that. We've seen that in most things that she's in. Particularly No Time to Die is coming to mind. Like the scene where he finds her in the bar and she's got the dress on and she's drinking the cola. I was like, I see that and I'm like, that's Mystique. But speaking of No Time to Die, my 1A is Lea Seydoux.
Oh, interesting. Because. So I've gone De Armas.
Yeah.
I've gone there, but I thought like for Leia Seydoux, I was very close to putting her as Emma Frost. Like she was definitely in my running for that more so than this. I wouldn't have even pinned her for that. For me, De Armas was a weird one because like I was so close to putting Megan Fox in here because I already had De Armas cast in a different role. Like basically, there was one character that was a potential gender swap for me, and I had Ana de Armas in that role, and I really liked the idea of it. Basically, I was going to cast her as Gambit, and I really liked the idea of like gender swapping Gambit. I thought that was really fun.
I like that.
I also thought like you can get away with Rogue being gay. I thought that would be a really fun twist on it. But then after I cast my Rogue, I was like, they don't really look right together. But my Rogue pick is so spot on that I'm not.
Yeah, you're not.
But then I've got to revert. So basically, my Rogue pick was so spot on that I was like, okay, so I need to change my Gambit. And then I realised, like, okay, actually, I've just worked out who my Gambit's going to be based on who my Rogue is. Because there's two actors that are kind of a duo, or like have been in things together that look like are spot on for Rogue and Gambit. So basically, De Armas then got left to the Mystique role, and I think it's just as good. But yeah, she could have as easily been my Gambit.
That's fair. I love it. That's like, I think when we Leia Seydoux is I just think she just feels a little bit. I think, like I say, Mystique kind of needs to know that she is a centre of attention in or out of All Blue, and I think Leia Seydoux does that. But I don't know. I just think she has a bit of a kind of more nonchalant energy, which I kind of like a little bit more. But
I just don't think she looks the part in the way that like Ana de Armas or Megan Fox do.
See, for me, one thing that I kind of mentioned this with Abbey Lee Kershaw is Abbey Lee Kershaw and Leia Seydoux. I mean, they're both gorgeous, but they both have, like I say, an interesting face, which I think would shine through more under the makeup. You know, we're going on. I believe we were going to talk about the Brotherhood.
Yeah, so straight in with like Sabretooth, Pyro, Juggernaut, essentially.
Yeah. So where do you want to start? Because they're all. I mean, I only have one for each of them.
Yeah, so I would rather get Sabretooth and Juggernaut out of the way because I think they're infinitely less interesting characters. I think Pyro, I'm far more...
I'm kind of on the other foot, but I've not read enough stories where Pyro is presented well enough to really have an attachment to Pyro.
Not even that, I just feel like Pyro is the easiest one to like get right. I don't think any of them are particularly interesting. I think Pyro's one though where you can make some adjustments and make him kind of interesting, whereas I think Sabretooth and Juggernaut are really just kind of lost causes. I think I basically should we just go in with Sabretooth because my notes kind of tie directly to this. So literally my only notes for Sabretooth are all this brother ever literally this is what I've written down. All this brother ever does is snarl at you in these films. Can bro just be rambunctious for 1 second?
So I have a fun Sabretooth.
I've also gone no one cares. I've like my final bullet point on Sabretooth, and my second and final one is also no one cares about Sabretooth. Stop giving us character building stuff with Sabretooth. The guy's total cannon fodder. I don't need to see his backstory or understand his pain.
Yeah, I think for me I've kind of done I've done the same. Like for me with my Sabretooth, I just have someone that I think would be a lot of fun there. I think someone that brings a physicality to it, but I also quite like. I don't love when they. I mean, I understand why, and obviously, comics and canon and all that. But I think Sabretooth is just like a sort of fun one-trick pony, and not like an ideological foe for Wolverine to tackle.
He's very much like a henchman, and he's just like like I said, he's cannon fodder.
And I have picked someone who played maybe the ultimate cannon fodder character in a movie, and I think he'd be a lot of fun here. So I have, like I say, I have no backups here. I'm just going to go right in with it. A few things I want from my Sabretooth. He's got to feel big. He's got to feel cunning, but not cunning in the way that like a Mr. Sinister has to feel cunning. He has to feel a kind of everything that you looked for with your Wolverine, I looked for with my Sabretooth.
Okay.
And it only really left one actor for me. I also went with an Australian. And maybe it's fun if we see him square up against my Wolverine, who's 5'5". I think this actor's like 6'2". I think that creates a fun sort of visual disparity between the two, especially if he's handled pretty convincingly. My Sabretooth is Captain Boomerang himself, Jai Courtney.
He was my second option. Jai Courtney was my B option. And I think I'm kind of annoyed that I didn't go with him as my A, because for what I've been saying about Sabretooth, for the amount of Sabretooth slander I've been given, I think the guy that I've picked is maybe a bit too A-list. I've gone with Charlie Hunnam.
Oh.
Now, he absolutely looks the part, and I think him, if you, like, you can imagine him across from Karl Urban, like, they look like that's...
Yeah.
He is very much like the... you know, in Iron Man 1 where he fights the Ironmonger, and it's just kind of like Iron Man but slightly different. I think Charlie Hunnam is like a very nice fit for like Karl Urban but slightly different. I think they've got a very similar look about him, but like like I said, Charlie Hunnam is probably a bit A-list for like a cannon fodder, like I'm wanting Sabretooth to be. So maybe I am going to change that and go Jai Courtney as my A pick. So
I think Jai Courtney brings a lot of fun. Because I did, role.
It was between the two, and I went with Charlie Hunnam. But I think, you've absolutely, like, the fact that you've said it now is kind of almost confirmed it for me.
Speaking of one-trick ponies, we'll go on to then. I feel bad. I feel Juggernaut in the comics and in animated material is a lot easier to make interesting. But I think if we're doing movies and we have all these characters to pick from, we just have a big man with a concrete helmet who runs through walls.
Yeah. Now, I do like the idea of maybe showing a bit more of Juggernaut's backstory, make him a bit involved with Xavier. Like, I don't think they've really touched on that in the films. I would like to see him be a little bit not like, don't overdo it to the point where he's like a major plot point or anything, but I would like I like the idea that maybe Juggernaut just like storms into the X-Mansion and like goes for Xavier's head, and Xavier's like, brother, like that sort of shit. Like, I think that would be like
See, the only thing is, my Juggernaut casts aren't really similar in age to Xavier, but I don't.
I've got one guy, and it's total novelty. It's like similar to like, you know how I went John Cena for Colossus.
I think we might have the same pick here. I feel like we might have the same pick.
Right. On
so
three.
I think. So it's probably going to be like a CGI character mostly, but I think we're going to get a big guy in to kind of be the base.
Yeah, and it'll be his face.
Okay, so like, I don't think it is if we're talking about faces then.
Because this guy looks like Juggernaut.
No, this guy does look like Juggernaut.
Okay, give us who you've got.
So my runner-up, I've just put here, my runner-up just says, or a wrestler. Maybe Omos, because he's 7'4", or whatever the fuck he is. But I've just put down Hathor Bjornsson, who was the Mountain in Game of Thrones.
Oh. So your B option was or a wrestler?
Yeah, I don't have a particular wrestler in mind.
Because my A option actually is a wrestler. The guy I've picked is an actual wrestler. I've gone with Brock Lesnar.
Oh. Yeah.
I think that would be hilarious. Just throw Brock Lesnar in.
That would be quick fun. Yeah.
Because you know what I mean? You don't need to make it. He doesn't need to act. Like what? What does he say? I'm the Juggernaut bitch, and then run through the wall. That's it. He's got to say I'm the Juggernaut bitch. No, but he's
bring
got
back Vinnie Jones.
No, not even that. But like, I'm not even being funny. Like at some point in this new, like when we get a new Juggernaut, he has to say it.
He's got, yeah.
Like he has to.
I think I've put down or a wrestler, but I've got my A would be Hathor Bjornsson, just because he's huge.
So I've got Brock Lesnar. My notes consist of big dumb man works for me. And then I've also put let him be a bit more involved with Xavier. Don't make it a plot point, but just make it known. You know, maybe when he meets Magneto for the first time, they've already met before or something like that.
And now to round out the Brotherhood, another one who I mean, I don't have overly strong opinions about Pyro. Maybe that's just because I haven't read enough of Pyro.
No, I'm very much the same. Like
kind of comics.
I don't have. I'm not very strong opinion on Pyro, but I do think you could have some fun with him, and I do have a case for them. They could make him, like, they have the ability here to make Pyro really fun.
So I have a couple. When I was thinking about it, I only wrote down one for Pyro, but I have a couple others who I've put down. I have some gender swaps in here.
Before you go in, can I just give you like a bit of like a rundown of what I want to see, kind of thing? So, what I've said for me, doing Pyro this time, I feel like Pyro should very much be the Brotherhood's version of Iceman, who will act as like a POV character, because I think like obviously we said we want Iceman to kind of act as our POV character in the first class. I think having a POV character on both sides would be really effective, and have someone that can introduce you to the Brotherhood and like have him be radicalized in real time, and you're seeing him like learning about the Brotherhood, and you're kind of seeing it through his eyes. It almost gives you someone to sympathize with the Brotherhood. I have as well. I have one thing. My kind of one note for Pyro is, because from whenever I kind of read any stories where Pyro is like a big part, is he needs to enjoy what he does. He can't be conflicted in it, and obviously he can be corrupted. He can be corrupted and brought over, or he can just gravitate to the Brotherhood from the start. And he doesn't necessarily need to be like a sadist, and he's like, I'm loving burning humans alive or whatever the fuck. He doesn't need to necessarily love it, but he needs to feel a sense of satisfaction from it. Yeah. So for me, like, basically what I've written, the exact words I've written is definitely should be like the Brotherhood's version of Iceman, who will act as a POV character. It's a fun idea to have a POV character on both sides, and it feels poetic almost that those would be the fire guy and the ice guy. And then my second note is like, this is the major one I've put. He doesn't need to be some slimy little freak like he is in the original films. Just make him a bit of a twat, and like I think we should be able to sympathise with him.
I think, like I say, I don't think he should necessarily like enjoy it the way like he's like a sadist who enjoys burning people alive.
Yeah, he's not like this slimy little freak that he was in those films.
In his mind, what he's doing is a necessary step, and he shouldn't ever be grappling with the consequences of that. Through his morality.
Like, to him, that is just like that. To him, that is the moral thing. That's the moral right point.
You know,
and I've
to
said
him,
like
it's like to him the way he kind of sees it is like, you know, like stepping on a spider almost. You know?
Yeah, but at the same time, like, so obviously we don't want him to be conflicted, and I agree with that, but I also don't think he should just be this total prick. Like, for me, I think he should I think he should just be this kind of clearly very misguided guy, and he's just like, he clearly thinks it's the right thing, and he's kind of, when the films go into talking about like pro-mutant radicalization, I think he should very much be like the poster boy for it, and kind of like he's the POV character, and like, if you kind of, the films could maybe follow him, and as the audience, we kind of like, as he learns about the Brotherhood and as he sort of becomes radicalized, we almost kind of learn to sympathize with it and go, oh, actually, no, this kind of makes sense. Like, I could see why he would go for this, and you can sympathize with it. He's very much a POV character, I feel like.
Yeah. For me, my original first pick, who I thought of a couple of days ago, was, because I've thought of someone better and more appropriate, because I do also agree that he should feel in line and similar ages to Iceman. So my original pick was Tom Felton, Draco Malfoy.
Okay.
I think
he'd
be a lot of fun there. And it's not necessarily for what he did as Malfoy, it's for what he does in that first Planet of the Apes movie when he's the guy at the ape sanctuary who's abusing the apes.
Yeah,
like the way he sees the apes are a lower life form, so he gets to do what he does. You know?
Mm-hmm.
So I like that, but the more I thought about it, and we want someone similar in age to Bobby, not only have I went for a gender swap, but I've gone for double woke points because I've cast an Asian actor as well as swapping the gender. But I think if we want someone who has no real qualms with what they're doing and they believe what they're doing is the right thing on their journey, as much as I am a noted hater of this movie, I think Stephanie Sue from Everything Everywhere All at Once, who is the daughter and the villain, and she's coming across the multiverse to kill her mum for being a dick or whatever, I think she'd be a lot of fun as Pyro.
Right, okay.
I'm a noted hater of that movie, but I do like her.
Basically, for me, like I said, I want him to be kind of sympathetic. Obviously, not conflicted, but just like very obviously misguided. He thinks he's doing the right thing. He's not conflicted about it by any means, but he's just kind of like I said, he needs to be someone that we can follow and that we can kind of sympathise with.
I think for that is kind of why I thought of Stephanie Sue, because that's pretty much her arc in Everything Everywhere All at Once.
Yeah, because like he needs to be someone that like I feel like the audiences will get behind. He needs to be kind of one of those people who you'll see like TikTok edits about afterwards, and they'll be like, "Free up my guy!" Like we love him so much. So I've gone with an actor that's kind of in that scene, is kind of one of those TikToky like very like fan edity kind of guys. He just needs to be likable, and he needs to be kind of like, you need to be able to see why he would get radicalized. I've gone with maybe a little bit old, considering my Iceman's Jack Quaid. Maybe not. I've gone with Jeremy Allen White.
No, I like that, because
I like the look of him.
You can do both of them, say they're both 30.
Yeah,
late 20s.
But yeah, I like
Maybe one
I do like the look
like...
of Jeremy Allen White. My B pick would have been Joe Keery from Stranger Things, but I think he's maybe
I like that.
I think he could be either Iceman or Pyro.
I think he's one of my Iceman runners up.
He's absolutely one of my Pyro,
up, but he should have been.
Yeah, he's absolutely one of my Pyro runners up. But I've gone Jeremy Allen White because he's very much like in that, like he's someone that I feel like the audiences could get behind, and you could be like afterwards, you'd be like, he's just free up my guy. Like he's just misguided.
Yeah, definitely. So now that we've done the Brotherhood, and I hate to bury him right in the middle, but we got to talk about possibly definitely my favourite X-Men villain, possibly my all-time favourite comic book villain. We've got to talk about Mr. Sinister.
Are you insane? Wait, hang on a second.
I fucking love Mr. Sinister. I think he's so great.
I was about to come on here and be like, Mr. Sinister is like my least favourite villain.
Bro,
I just
do not see the vision. You do not see the vision.
My thing with Sinister is like, I think he's more of a comedic villain. Like I think he's got more like a...
That's one thing I've taken into account. He feels very camp, he feels very panto, he feels very like...
Not even that, but like, I just think... Not even that, but I just think like for me, Mr. Sinister is not like this mega crazy villain like people seem to kind of make him out with. Like he's not Apocalypse level. For me, Mr. Sinister in these films is like an Ultron. Or where he comes in, does one film, and he's maybe he comes like, for me, Mr. Sinister comes in and does one film, and he's kind of maybe a precursor to Apocalypse. That's as far as it goes with Sinister.
Oh yeah, I'm the same. I don't think he should be like a big
he should not be that guy that's like
thing.
Recurring.
But
maybe
like I say,
Loki.
he is maybe my favourite comic book villain of all time. I fucking love him. I think he's great, and I think it's because of the sort of, he's never going to be that huge threat, but he still poses enough of an issue, and he's like a step in the middle.
Yeah, if I had to give you like if I had to give you like a film slate, right? The way that I'd do it is I'd go, the first film, your villain's Magneto, set up the whole divide. Then I'd go film 2 is Mr. Sinister, and have maybe your Apocalypse precursor, like your Loki in Avengers 1 type scenario. Number 3 would be just something totally irrelevant, like Stryker and the Mutant Massacre or something like that. And then I'd do like a 2-parter for Apocalypse. But Mr. Sinister is very much like my Ultron villain, where he's just kind of... He's very much like a villain that they fight when they're very much a team, and he's very much a mission villain for them. If that makes any sense. I agree, but
for me, personally, I'd swap it, and I'd put Sinister in the first movie, because...
Yeah, I wouldn't mind doing that either.
General audiences know the crack with Magneto and the Brotherhood, and we can still have him in it, and we can still set them up as a threat. But Sinister's probably the highest profile X-Men villain we haven't seen on screen.
So the way that I've laid mine out is I know what you're saying, because the way I've laid mine out is, if I'm doing like a 3-phase structure, instead of it being X-Men 1 happens at the end of phase 1, X-Men 2 happens at the end of phase 3, the way I would go about it is X-Men 1 is the very first film, and at the end of phase 1 then you get X-Men 2, so you get 2 X-Men films in the first phase.
I think I like the idea of
like, cause
bringing
you need
in
to
Sinister.
kick off with an X-Men film.
I think it's 100%, and I think the idea of bringing in Sinister to set up Apocalypse, to then have us do the Brotherhood and Stryker and almost forget about Apocalypse.
Yeah, he is
and
the
then,
Loki. Sinister's like your Loki. He is like,
yeah,
and that's why, like, for me,
a lot of the things that for me with Sinister, the sort of playfulness and the cunning and the smarts and the ability to kind of, he's not really seen as like a physical threat. He's more of a mental threat and a tormentor. And with Tom Hiddleston's Loki, I just want like camp, over the top, fun, someone who's not afraid to look dumb by putting themselves in a cape.
So yeah, the way that I've laid it out, like I said, obviously I would go in phase, because I think the what makes the biggest difference here between like the Avengers scenario is that, like, you've got, with the Avengers, you've got to set up all the characters and then establish the Avengers. Whereas with the X-Men, I think it's, you need to start off with the X-Men and then establish them as solo characters. So that's why, for me, like, phase 1, you open with X-Men 1 and then end the phase with X-Men 2, rather than ending the phase on X-Men and then ending phase 2. So I would go, like, X-Men 1 opens phase 1, X-Men 2 closes it, then you hold off for a bit, you get X-Men 3 at the end of phase 2, and then at the end of phase 3 you get like X-Men 4 and 5. So you essentially get 5 parts of an X-Men.
Yeah. So
but yeah, Mr. Sinister is very much like your big phase 1 kind of precursor.
So a couple of things to go on before we crack on with our picks. Obviously I've said that I wanted to be like big and over the top and camp, but his backstory is he was a scholar in the 1800s obsessed with evolution. He learned of the X gene and was given powers by Apocalypse. So he's not a mutant, but he was brought under the wing of one due to his obsession with learning about evolution. He loves experimenting on humans and mutants, doesn't really care, absolutely loves cloning himself, and it brings in a really fun thing. He's not afraid to die because there's a million more of him, which I think is a very interesting thing that comes up quite a lot. Okay. And my last little note here is I've put always up to shenanigans. So I'm going to rock in with my 2 runners up here. I think he's just a little bit old, but we can't talk about over-the-top camp actors who go full out with everything. We can't talk about Mr. Sinister without mentioning Tim Curry.
Oh, that's fun. I think
that's a lot of fun. I also think, obviously, I just finished the Umbrella Academy and I've gone back to restart. Robert Sheehan has a lot of that sort of, like, as Klaus. And
the only thing with him is, I don't know if I don't know if he's got the right build for it. I don't know if he's, like, wide enough.
Here's the thing.
Like he's a bit of a twink, isn't he?
Yeah, my pick also definitely isn't wide enough, but I just think he's the perfect pick. I think Robert Sheehan will be fun. I just like him for other things more, and I also like him for this less than my number 1 pick. And this is such an odd and rogue thing to specifically point at for Mr. Sinister. But have you seen the cinematic masterpiece Paddington 2?
No. If I'm totally honest, I don't know how that's relevant.
That Hugh Grant plays a sort of disgraced, a sort of West End star who's fallen off, and then he frames Paddington so he can steal the treasure. You know, basic kids movie plot.
What's insane about that is that if you just said Hugh Grant without the Paddington thing, it still would have made absolute sense. Like, you did not need to lead with Paddington. Like that.
Yeah, but when I watch him as Phoenix Buchanan, I'm like, that just feels so Mr. Sinister. And then in the Dungeons and Dragons movie, he does more of the same. And then in every other Hugh Grant movie, like, Hugh Grant is Mr. Sinister, and no one can come close.
Oh, actually, speaking of the Dungeons and Dragons movie, do you know who kind of looks like Mr. Sinister? I don't know if he'd be a good shot. Chris Pine would be interesting for Mr. Sinister.
Oh, that would be a lot of fun.
I know he's like tends to be like kind of Luke Skywalker, he just like hero-y roles, but I would be interested to see because he looks like Mr. Sinister.
I have him down as someone
I'd be intrigued
else for another franchise though, but that would be good. But my Sinister is Hugh Grant.
My Sinister, I'm going to lead in because this is much less thought through. I just thought someone that kind of looks the part, someone that kind of plays. Because I thought I wrote like, I like the idea of Mr. Sinister being a bit of a cringe loser. Obviously, that's kind of what you're getting at with the whole campy thing. But I didn't think that was the proper characterization, really. So that's not where I've really gone into. But I kind of thinking he can do a bit of that. Like, you see him do it, and you know I love The Boys actor. I've got Giancarlo Esposito. I think like he would just be interesting.
He'd be a lot of fun. He'd be a lot of fun.
Because he can't do the camping thing. You see him do it in that show. And like,
and I
he's
think
got
as
the
well
very,
with
like,
him,
he's a very sophisticated guy.
He wants to do big, fun, over the top things again. You can tell in every interview he does.
Yeah.
I like that.
There's something about like the way he talks, and like he's got that big smile, you know, that big cheesy grin where he's like, you can tell he's up to something. And I like Giancarlo there, and that's why I didn't go for him as Magneto, but he could have easily gone.
So up next,
but you'll know more about Shaw than I do. I'm not like massively versed in him.
Neither am I. I don't. Shaw is more so that kind of spoils it. The next one we're going to talk about is Sebastian Shaw, who is basically here for me as the way that we get introduced to Emma Frost. I like Sebastian Shaw.
Essentially.
But he's very much a one-trick pony in the sense of, if he's not the Lord Imperial of the Hellfire Club, he is scheming to once again become the Lord Imperial of the Hellfire Club.
Yeah, like when you see him...
Like a secret society of, not necessarily evil mutants, but like mustache twirling, like, you know?
Yeah, they're just kind of rich, like that's what it is. Like in the animated show, he's kind of just characterized as this kind of sophisticated, well put together, like...
Yeah,
kind of he's a bit of a countryman, isn't he? And
he comes from old money.
Yeah,
he's like
basically he's just kind of this
double breast. You know?
He's just kind of this old like sophisticated countryman, and he's like he's just a bit of a shady guy. But I think a lot of like with Sebastian Shaw, a lot of this casting, what this casting is going to come down to is that kind of old money vibe, and basically just like the look of him.
I agree. I have, like I say, Shaw's not a character I'm massively obsessed with, but I have a few picks here who could be fun. Yeah. Shaw is also kind of characterised as sort of like a bigger, kind of more imposing guy, and my Shaw isn't, mainly because I don't really care loads about Shaw as a sort of more imposing physical threat, and I like Shaw as a more sort of mental...
So in my rewrite,
I like what he poses for the world.
Yeah. So in my rewrite, I've completely kind of changed what the Hellfire Club is. I've just completely I've just changed what the Hellfire Club is, because I think that it's so easy to just put them on the same level as like the Brotherhood or Strikers guys, or like there's so many organisations in the X-Men universe that I think you really do need to differentiate them. So for me,
I think the Hellfire Club are more interesting as not a direct opponent to the X-Men. And not even antagonistic to the X-Men, but because of what they do to the world at large, they come into conflict with the X-Men.
Yeah, so for me, the Hellfire Club, in my rewrite, they are kind of a bit more directly against the X-Men. For me, the Hellfire Club, in my rewrite, it's totally different. Like, it's not something that's like even resembles what we know as the Hellfire Club, but my rewrite basically is that the Hellfire Club are like a terrorist organisation, very similar to like a mafia or something like that, and the whole point is that. But the whole point in them is that they are maybe like. But wait, they're basically the point in them is that they're like mutants that have been kind of, you know how the whole point is that like humans hate the mutants and that like they're wrong and there's something wrong with God. So my Hellfire Club is basically a bunch of like maybe half mutants or mutants that have just accepted that mutants are what's wrong with the world, and are now kind of acting as terrorists on behalf of the humans to scapegoat mutant kind. That's basically what I've rewritten the Hellfire Club as, is this kind of underground organisation where it's like mutants that sympathise with humans and like almost want to be inferior to humans, so they will scapegoat and like do things against. They're basically mental...
It's just all Samuel L. Jackson and Django.
Mate, I suppose so. But they're basically just the guys... They're just the guys who've basically accepted, like, we are what's wrong with humanity, and so let's, like, use our gifts to try and rid the world of the rest of mutant kind, including ourselves. So that's my Hellfire Club kind of rewrite, I guess. So it's just a different vibe. I can't remember why that was relevant, but that's what I've gone with.
Yeah, I think so. For me, like I say, Shaw is kind of typically portrayed as a sort of bigger guy, and I've not gone for that. If we want someone who looks a lot like...
That's what it was.
If we want someone who
they
looks
don't need to be like these big guys.
Shaw, Liev Schreiber would be fun, but
okay,
he's not what I've gone with. I think going for mine, which I quite like, is a sort of like an intellectual sort of opponent for them. I think John Hannah could be a lot of fun here.
Interesting, because I thought you were about to say like my choice then, if I'm totally honest.
But I said earlier, I've picked someone who is in the MCU already. He's not someone that was, he was consequential in that movie, but no one really remembers that movie for him. And I also think we're about to hit the reset and kind of keep what we have and restart, and maybe in 5-10 years we'll do Iron Man again with a new actor or whatever. But like I say, I've picked an actor that I think was underused in his film and isn't necessarily remembered for being a part in that film, and I also don't think worked incredibly well in that film because we're not really playing to a lot of his strengths. So if we're doing Sebastian Shaw as a more kind of intellectual opponent, comes from old money, has a grace about him, has a presence about him, has an elegance about him, I think Jude Law could be a lot of fun here.
Oh, okay. The thing is now, is Jude Law not in 2 Marvel films now? Is Jude Law not like Ronan the Accuser?
No, that's Lee Pace.
Oh, right, yeah, okay, sweet, no worries. Yeah, that's fine.
And like I say, no one really remembers Captain Marvel for Jude Law.
Yeah, so basically, my Sebastian Shaws, like I said, basically, I've done this whole rewrite of the Hellfire Club. They don't need to be imposing. They're just kind of like weird little terrorist guys. It operates more as like a terrorist organisation, as like a mafia or something like that, than it does like this like really old money group. They can kind of just be like these really rough and ready to go guys. But there were 2 options, and they're basically just the same guy. So like it changes who I like more, but one of them I like slightly more just for this role, just because I feel like he does the old money thing and maybe a little bit better. So my B option was Orlando Bloom, and my A option was Luke Evans. So I've gone with Luke Evans.
Yeah,
because I think he looks the part.
I really like Luke Evans.
He looks the part. I think I think he can play that kind of like weaselly, like giving out orders, maybe not necessarily the most at liberty to give out orders. Like but it could easily be Orlando Bloom. It could as easily have been Orlando Bloom. I just think Orlando Bloom's maybe a bit. I think he's maybe a bit straight edge for it.
Yeah. I also think Orlando Bloom could maybe be a fun Sinister.
Interesting.
Just the kind of got the fun
sort
of energy.
Orlando Bloom, hear me out. Orlando Bloom, Angel.
Oh,
interesting shout. Right.
That
anyway,
could be fun. Right.
So
now we're going to get to the real
Evans.
reason that Sebastian Shaw is here, and that's Emma Frost. Emma Frost is the most interesting member of the Hellfire Club, and it's not even close. We've spoke about Emma Frost briefly in our First Class video. Emma Frost is a villain. She's a telepath. Then she develops a secondary mutation whilst on Genosha, I believe, where her skin can become like as hard as diamonds, and it's kind of indestructible, but it has its limits.
It's a result of the mutant massacre. It's something to do with like the fallout from that. She gets that secondary mutation, and
she's like kind of indestructible. The main things that we want to look at here is she's like the it girl. She's like this has this huge presence. She's always wearing the finest clothes. She's always like, I think in the same way that like, I don't know, I think in the way that like Mystique has a sort of supermodel presence, Emma Frost has like a sort of, I don't know, almost like a royal presence. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
she's always wearing
the way I was going to break it down was I was going to say like Mystique, like you don't necessarily have to pick like an all-time baddie. Like Mystique, obviously you go for someone attractive, but it's not. That's not the purpose of her. Like you can easily go like there's other things. Whereas with Emma Frost and Psylocke, I think in those cases you actually do just go for like an absolute all-time baddie. I think you literally look at who are the most attractive girls in the world, and who of those girls is the most capable of doing it. So that's kind of where I've gone with Emma Frost, and the same with Psylocke. Is I think that it's far more important for those two than Mystique to just go for an all-timer.
For me, like I say, we're looking at just absolute stunning actor.
She is that it girl. Emma Frost is absolutely that she almost like Emma Frost. It's hard to say, but like Emma Frost almost operates as like a trophy. Do you know what I mean? Like a lot of the time, she's kind of treated by the men around her as like kind of a trophy or like a side piece.
And one of the things that I think is one of the most interesting things about her character, because eventually she turns good, leaves the Hellfire Club, joins the X-Men, and one of the sort of key defining things about Scott and Jean's relationship is they are so perfect for each other, and everything goes so well that the pair of them get in their own head and drive each other away, Jean to Logan and Scott to Emma. And Scott was with Emma for quite a long time in the comics. It's not like a thing that they did and then they went back on it and Scott
it wasn't like a weird Elseworlds thing, no.
Yeah, it was a part of canon for a considerable amount of time. So she's an incredibly important character, and once again I've looked at people around about the same age as my Scott. I have a couple runners up. I have one who I think would be a fun older Emma Frost. So she obviously doesn't get it because she's older than my Scott by quite a bit. But I think Rosamund Pike would be really fun.
Okay.
My kind of runners up closer to age are Natalie Dormer. She kind of does a lot of that sort of does kind of some of that Emma stuff in like some of her other roles.
Is that kind of like luxury, like high class woman sort of thing that you want?
Yeah. I think if we didn't just use her in Secret Invasion, Emilia Clarke here as well, another Game of Thrones alum who does that sort of regal thing really well.
Especially like in Han Solo, I think that's a case for Emilia Clarke.
Yeah.
Is that Solo movie?
I think she's great. I'm so upset they wasted her in Secret Invasion.
Yeah, absolutely.
Then my runner-up number one, who was my not one pick until I just kind of thought we could maybe see something a little bit different out of the actor I've picked, and who I think definitely has the ability to do it. My runner-up number one is Jodie Comer.
Okay.
I think she'd be great here.
I think she's more of a Mystique, though.
I also quite like her for Mystique too. I think she's great. I haven't picked her because I have her as a character I like much more for another franchise.
Okay,
and
so
my pick.
Go for it.
My pick is Saoirse Ronan. I think Saoirse Ronan could be a lot of fun here and could turn a lot of heads here.
Okay. So, like I mentioned, I think like Emma Frost, you definitely need to go with like an all-timer, just like an absolute, like no debates, like the it girl. Like obviously they made her secondary mutation, like she can turn into a diamond. It almost is like them saying like this girl is literally here to be a possession of whoever's closest to her. So I have literally gone like who are the it girls right now. So my original option, I really like it, but I think she's just a bit young, and I also like her as another. I like her in another franchise. I think Sabrina Carpenter would have been fun. I think she could if we were going like with a younger group of X-Men, I think she's probably the go-to there, but I just think she's maybe a bit young for this set that we've gone with. My B option would have been, like obviously you said Leia Seydoux. I think that's a really fun idea, and she definitely does like the kind of regal, well, not necessarily regal, but just very like classy. Do you know what I mean? She's a classy girl.
That's it. But there's a class to Emma Frost.
Yeah. Instead, I think it was a bit more obvious than that, if I'm totally honest. I think there's one girl right now that is just universally adored, it seems, and she looks the part. So I've just had to go with Sydney Sweeney.
I do like Sydney Sweeney. I like her more for the more obvious one, though.
You know, she looks the part. She's gonna sell the tickets. Like, she probably just is Emma Frost. Like, realistically, in everything that she's been in, she's kind of is that hypersexualized like object of desire, and I think that's what you go with for Emma Frost. So like, she's a super obvious pick, and I think that combined with the fact that she so thoroughly looks the part, I think she's like a really decent pick there.
Yeah, I think she's a really interesting pick there and a really good pick. Like I say, Sydney Sweeney is another one, like my Jason Isaac is Magneto. There's an obvious one for Sydney Sweeney that, to me, makes a lot of sense the more I think about it. But I do like her here.
What's the other one?
Black Cat.
Ah!
So, second last on our roster of villains, we've got Reverend or Colonel Stryker. Whatever point in his life you want to play him as. I know actually that we have picked them as different points. You prefer the army man, you prefer General Stryker, you prefer the one militarizing.
Like so I kind of like a bit of like a G.I. Joe douchey guy. I don't think he should be like mega young, like same age as the X-Men. I think maybe a little bit older, but I don't think he should still very much be like a young guy, like clearly a young guy, and he's not at the point where you call him middle aged yet. He's still very much like very young, very fit. Like, so I think that level.
I've gone on the other end because I much prefer Reverend Stryker, and I think, especially when you look at like the way that mega churches in America are, which are just essentially ways to launder money and make people incredibly rich. I mean, look at that show, The Righteous Gemstones, which is also making fun of that whole culture. I really like that side and how he is this fire and brimstone preacher telling everyone that if you don't believe in God, the world's how the world has went back from being so faith driven is what has caused mutations and what has caused this, and how everything is an act of defiance and a spit in God's face. I love that. I think that's so interesting. And then when you add in on top the wrinkle that he takes a lot of money from his church and funnels that into, can maybe funnel that into the Essex Corp to help Sinister, experiment on mutants, or he funnels the money from his church to help Trask build the Sentinels. I think that, personally to me, I think that's a much more interesting route for the character.
With the whole Stryker and Sinister thing, for me, I really like the idea of, like, obviously I've said, like, Stryker being this young guy, and I think I love the idea of his relationship with Sinister just being this thing where it's this young guy who doesn't really know how mutants work. He would never know anything about the science of it, but he's just kind of the leader of this army unit that fucking hate them. And the idea that, like, he brings in Sinister because, like, Sinister is a specialist in this stuff. And I just love the idea of, like, him talking to Sinister and being like, oh, like...
And I also like the idea because Sinister is...
Almost like having Sinister... Yeah, almost having, like, the idea that Sinister is on Stryker's payroll, but, like, Stryker is just oblivious to all of this going on. He's just kind of this hothead that's like, tell me what to go for, and Sinister's like, okay, let me work it out. He's almost like the beast of Stryker's
while he's
militia.
Doing that as well, though, like, he's funneling money, like I said, to Trask and the Sentinel Project.
Yeah,
I think just having him be so blinded by hate and this sort of fire and brimstone preacher saying that because people stopped going to church, we now have a mutation and people trying to steal the land that God left for humans. I think that's really interesting. So my main thing is he's got to be Southern, because I think as a sort of fire and brimstone Baptist preacher, we need a Southern boy. So all of the actors I've looked at here are Southern.
So for me, like, with my rewrite, obviously I've said, like, Sinister comes in X-Men 2, and basically the whole point of that film is you've got, like, Sinister's just a scientist. In mine, Sinister is a mutant. He is actually a mutant in my kind of thing. Basically the whole point is that, like, Stryker kind of hires him as this guy to kind of come in and learn about mutants and basically give them techniques of how to stop mutants, right? Because he knows about them. And throughout that, like, obviously you've got Nathaniel Essex just kind of becomes obsessed with Cyclops and Jean Grey, and kind of starts going behind Stryker's back because he's very aware that Stryker's just this oblivious fucking guy. He's, like, just a bit of an idiot, and he's just kind of this hothead. And my whole thing is that it all leads to, like, a confrontation where Stryker pulls up Essex and he's like, what is all this information you're hiding from us? And Essex kind of just says to him, nah, I'm a mutant, clears out the guards and then leaves with the X-Men and kind of tries to get in with them. But so my Stryker is kind of, like, very much like a similar vibe to what you go for with your Cyclops, where he's, like, kind of that Boy Scouty figure, maybe a bit more of, like, an airhead, like a bit more of just a fucking meathead guy. And I think because we're resetting the whole thing, I think we can get away with Channing Tatum coming in as William Stryker and doing.
I really like that.
Like, obviously, he's
really
just being
like
Gambit, and we don't know how that's going to pan out. We don't know what's going to happen with that, but like, and I've led with my actual pick. Like, it is Channing Tatum that I've gone with. I just like the idea of him playing like the 21 Jump Street character and just kind of being this mental meathead who's just like, oh, teach me how to kill them. Like, just work out how to fucking kill them. Run all these tests. But my B option was Liam Hemsworth.
Oh, I like that too.
I think he's maybe a bit serious for it, though. I think he may be. Well, I don't know. I don't want him to be like a Joker, but I also think like Liam Hemsworth. He almost like Liam Hemsworth's a guy that you can kind of get behind. Do you know what I mean? Like, if Liam Hemsworth says something, he's kind of like, he's got kind of a trustworthy face. He's kind of like he seems like a pretty reasonable guy. Do you know what I mean? Like, you can kind of get behind him. Whereas Channing Tatum will still be more on the kind of just this fucking meathead, like, hates the mutants thing.
So, like I say, for me, I've went in the Reverend Stryker direction. Like I say, I want a Southern actor who can sort of sell that. But I also want someone who can sell the charisma of a man who like leads this mega church and he's on TV, on your Fox Newses or whatever, talking about how it's a spit in the face of God and all these things. I want someone that you could believably see sat next to Tucker Carlson talking about how Nightcrawler is the reason that we're all going to hell.
Yeah, like a Theo Von type guy.
Not even that. I want someone that like feels believable. I also looked at a couple people here. I think this would be a really interesting place to get in a sort of mostly comedic actor. And
so you're going for like a podcast, like a
no. I'm still going for like your typical preacher, but I
get that. But you're going for kind of like the idea of like this guy who's just like kind of like an Alex Jones type figure. He's just spreading all this nonsense. Like, obviously different methods, but he's just kind of like this weird figure who's just kind of talking a lot of shit.
I think, like, the idea that he would be on, like, a Fox News thing is because he'd be, like, one of the bigger anti-mutant voices, but he'd still go to his mega church where, 2,000 people come every week.
So he does actually have, like, a level of power, like...
Yeah. So he's not just, like, someone, like, kind of spouting into the void. He actually has a real congregation that he speaks to.
Yeah, I also do like the idea, though. I do think that could be an interesting route to take it down.
Yeah, I do think that could work. But, so like I say, I've also kind of thought comedic actors, when they turn their hand at something serious, typically always surprise. And I think this would be a role that like a couple people, because you need that sort of captivating charisma and that big energy that a comedic actor can bring. Yeah. So, I have 6 runners up here. I have 7 people that came to mind. I'll just get this one out of the way. I think he would be fun, and I think he would surprise, going for that comedic actor, someone who does a lot of like sort of physical, big presence. I think Danny McBride would be fun here.
Okay.
It's such an off-the-wall shout, but I think Danny McBride could be fun. Rob Lowe, I think would be really fun. Jason Bateman, I think would be really fun. And now the serious actors. I think this guy is just aged out, and he's old and probably won't do it. But Tommy Lee Jones is basically a picture-perfect Reverend Stryker. I just think he's too old.
Was he not Stryker in the 2002 films?
No, that was Brian Cox from Succession, who I also think would be good if you did the Reverend as opposed to the General.
Tommy Lee Jones hates superhero films, though, doesn't he? I don't think he had a good time.
No, I just think he hates. I just think he hated his time on Batman.
Right.
Then my 2 runners-up, my runner-up 1 and 2, are 2 Southern actors who are very charismatic, and I think would be really, really fun here. Is Matthew McConaughey and Woody Harrelson.
Oh, McConaughey would smash that. McConaughey would be great.
McConaughey was my pick until I recently found out this actor is Southern. Where is he from? He's from Kentucky. He doesn't have that. He's someone that I think, does have a sort of Southern twang to his accent, but has mostly kind of Hollywooded out of him, which I think leans more into the respectable preacher aspect that I like. My Reverend Stryker is George Clooney.
George Clooney. Whoa, interesting. That's not where I thought you were going with that.
I think you look at like the con man stuff from the Ocean's movies, and you just look at all of his other incredible roles, take in the fact that he has a kind of little southern twang in his accent, but not enough so he can be the sort of nationwide media presence that everyone respects across America and the world, and he doesn't just look like some sort of southern hick with a church.
Yeah.
He has the right look of this clean-cut preacher, and then he's funneling all this money to Trask and Essex. Yeah. I think Clooney's a lot of fun for Stryker.
Interesting. That's not where I would have gone. As soon as you said McConaughey, I was like, I love that.
McConaughey would be great.
But no, I've gone, Channing Tatum for me.
So now, let's round it off. Where better to end it off than with the first ever mutant?
Yeah.
En Sabah Nur. He was a pharaoh. He built the pyramids with his mind sometimes. Yeah. Not all the time, but sometimes. I don't have incredibly strong feelings about Apocalypse, mainly because I don't think I've read enough. But it's obvious we need to treat this with the utmost respect. Yeah.
Which is why I'm going to change his character entirely here. And I'm going to... that's how we're going to lead with this. Basically, I'm just going to... Not really change his character. I think there's some things about his character that we need to discuss. I think I'm going to lay it out straight away that I think whatever you do with Apocalypse, you need to go down the route of this guy is so pro-mutant. Like, this is the most pro-mutant guy there has ever been. Like, this guy absolutely believes that mutants are the dominant species, to the point where you almost have Magneto looking like a performative activist. I think Apocalypse needs to be so pro-mutant to the point where, like, maybe he has a rule of, like, saying, like, no lethal force against mutants regardless.
Yeah.
Like, he's not going to try and kill the X-Men, he just needs to neutralise them. And have him just be this mega pro-mutant guy. And maybe to the point... And you could have different versions of it. Maybe at the start... So, like, if this is going to be a two-parter, maybe in part one, he wants to enslave humans. He wants to just kill humans off and lead the mutants, and then maybe the X-Men get in his way, and at the end of the first film he kind of turns his attention. He says, okay, so if the X-Men aren't going to submit to me, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of the X-Men, and I'm basically just going to enslave humankind and turn them into mutants. And that's kind of where my stuff, like, my Apocalypse changes kind of come in there. It's more to do with, like, his power set that I've kind of changed Apocalypse.
For me, I think with Apocalypse, my main thing, obviously as well I mentioned, Apocalypse comes from Egypt. He was the first mutant. He was a pharaoh in Egypt, like I said. Sometimes he built the pyramids with his powers. Sometimes he just enslaved the people to do his bidding. I looked at Egyptian actors, and Rami Malek gets so far away from Apocalypse. You're not coming in. You're not near. I looked at Egyptian actors, couldn't find one, so then I sort of expanded it to look at, well, what if Apocalypse comes from the cradle of life in Africa anyway? So I have looked at a black actor here.
I've got black actors.
I think he needs to feel... He needs to have this, and I know we talk about someone having a presence, but I feel like he needs to have a presence more than most, not just stature, but with his voice and with the way he speaks and the way he commands a room. And because he's...
I think I know where you've gone, actually.
Because he's a 4,000-year-old mutant, he needs to have the wisdom of, thousands of years, and he's pulled the strings behind the scenes from helping mutants survive and do things throughout history. And like I say, he's behind the scenes pulling the strings of Mr. Sinister. But I want someone who really leans into the high drama of it. And I don't mean leans into the drama of it the way I want your Sinister to lean into the sort of nonsense. I want someone who plays this... I want someone who treats this the way Michael Caine treated fucking Working with the Muppets, you know? Like, Michael Caine showed up to set and was like, I'm going to win an Oscar for this film or die trying. My Apocalypse has to feel like that in a Marvel film, you know what I mean? He's got to just feel so strong and powerful and almost Shakespearean, which maybe gives it away if you've seen the movie I'm thinking of. I have a few runners-up. I have 3 runners-up. 2 of the runners-up, we've heard them as both my picks for Magneto and Charles, but I also think Jeffrey Wright or Sterling K. Brown would be great here. I think if we want someone with an incredibly looming presence and voice, Tony Todd, Candyman, that would be lots of fun. But I said Shakespearean. I said I want someone with like an Oscar pedigree. I don't know. Something when I think about Apocalypse, it reminds me of one actor and one specific not one specific performance, but his performance in The Tragedy of Macbeth is a real standout from his recent work. I don't think there is a better actor right now that we could get for Apocalypse than Denzel Washington.
Yeah. So he's not my pick, but because I totally forgot about him, but he like absolutely just could have been my pick.
Yeah.
And I think the guy that I've picked is almost... I'm not saying he's going to have the potential to be like the next Denzel Washington, because he probably isn't, like, judging by the things that he's kind of been in, he probably isn't. But the guy that I've gone with has been in some fun things, and I just think he, more than anything, looks the part, and I could see him playing it in a similar way to Oscar Isaac, where Oscar Isaac's kind of this cool guy that obviously got that role and he kind of did his thing with it. And he was kind of like... He wasn't too bad, like, he wasn't awful, like, people didn't really like it, but he wasn't the worst in that film by any means. He's a bit more understated. I like the idea of a bit more understated Apocalypse, because when you see him in, like, the animated series, he's not necessarily, like, this massive presence. He's kind of, like, in the way that, like, Thanos is a massive presence, and, like, you feel like only a few characters here and there would get the chance to conversate with Thanos. Whereas, like, I feel like you're much more likely to see, like, Apocalypse in a room, having it out with other mutants and maybe going, like, nah, like, this is my point, and, like, having to prove himself a bit more. I feel like you would go with a bit more of a, like, an understated presence. But I also think, like, Denzel's a crazy shout, and I would love to see that. And I think if you do want to go with, like, this mega Egyptian, like, just this mega royalty presence, I think Denzel is a shout. Now, you know I love a The Boys actor. We've already mentioned it in this episode. And I think there's one The Boys actor that looks like Apocalypse, like spitting image. I've gone with Lars Alonso. And
I knew you were going to say Lars Alonso.
And it might be absolutely criminal for me to say, look, I know that he's mother's milk and that he's not the presence that you want, but like I think he could be I think he could.
But he's been in like other things where he has a lot more.
Yeah, this is what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. So he's been in things where he's a lot more serious, and bro, he just looks the part. So he looks like Apocalypse.
I watched something recently. I can't remember what did I watch him recently.
Avatar.
He's in Avatar.
He's in Fast and Furious.
Wasn't that?
You need a Fast and Furious actor that has an Apocalypse. Like
that's it. He's in Constantine with Keanu. That's what I saw him in recently. Man, and he's in The Harder They Fall, the movie about the Black Cowboys.
But yeah, like
I like Lars Alonso.
Between Avatar and like a few of the other things that he's done, like he can do serious. And I also think I like the idea that he's going to be a bit more understated. You know, he's not going to be the star of the show. In the way that you mentioned how, like, you don't want someone, like, mega A-list playing Mystique, I think I kind of like the same idea with an Apocalypse, where it's, like, I don't want someone, like, obviously, like, Apocalypse, if it's Denzel Washington, like, it's very obviously Denzel Washington, whereas I think Lars Alonso kind of will sink into that a bit more, and I think he will have a bit more fun with it. I also like the idea of having an Apocalypse that's a bit more physically present. Like, I like the idea of him being able to move around and, like, he's not just this big looming guy that kind of stands over you like this. Yeah. I like the idea that he can get down and dirty. And obviously, like I said,
I like that, but I think if we save Apocalypse for movie like 4 or 5, we then have the potential for him to have the Horsemen and to have his council to do his dirty work for him. That's why I've picked Denzel, even though he's older.
That's the thing. So
he can have people fighting for him.
With my rewrite, it kind of basically acknowledges a lot of this, and basically in the rewrite, it explains that basically the powers are totally different. So in my rewrite, Apocalypse's actual power, his only actual like natural power, is like matter manipulation. So you know, like when you see him in the films and he's moving all the sand about and shit. So in my rewrite, that's his only actual power, and basically I've written him to be like this ancient guy who was one of the first ever mutants, and he kind of dedicated his whole life to kind of traveling around and learning about mutations and like how the mutant genome works. And because of that, almost like kind of merged in with Mr. Sinister, where he's like, all this other stuff that he can do is kind of through machines, and he's kind of built these things using a mixture of like science and magic, and these machines that can maybe like customize mutant genomes and stuff like that. So that's where he gets his power to like affect the mutant genes and like upgrade people from. It's this idea that, but like the whole idea that his only actual power is that it's just the matter manipulation stuff, and everything else is just like stuff that he's learned and picked up throughout the years of studying mutants. And I think that leads directly into why I think he needs to be so pro-mutant and so heavily pro-mutant. And I also think that also you can have this presence of like have Apocalypse be the final, but like everything that the X-Men will ever have to deal with, you know, Apocalypse have him be the final boss of it. So you know the whole debate of like, oh, do you want the mutant cure or not? Have Apocalypse be the guy that says to Rogue, look, I can fucking fix you. I can give you your powers, upgrade your powers, and make it so that you don't have to kill anyone off. And then you can see why maybe Rogue would go, that there's potential there, and defect, and there we go, you've got Rogue as one of the Horsemen. Or you can see him say to Magneto, I can make you lift heavier weights, and I can make you be able to give life to metal objects. And then you see Magneto go, oh, actually, that I fuck with that. That's how Magneto the Horseman.
I think, as you say, with Apocalypse being the final boss, the first mutant, the sort of the reason that we are here, that's why I've went with Denzel, because there's not many people that feel more final boss than Denzel.
Yeah. But no, I think that kind of whole idea of him being like the final boss and like recruiting the mutants by basically being able to say to him, I'll give you these powers. I think that's why, to me, it's so important that his only real power himself is this matter manipulation stuff, because then I'm imagining this fight in my head where it gets to the end and Magneto kind of turns and he says, actually, fuck this, like, all you're talking about is, like, perfecting humanity and perfecting the mutant gene, and, like, you're selling it to all these mutants like you're going to perfect them. But in reality, everything that you've made for yourself, the whole reason you can do this is because of human science and human, like, skills that you've learned. So, like, if anything, you're an imperfection, and you could have this really cold moment where Magneto is just like, yeah, you said to eradicate imperfections, fucking see you in a bit, Apocalypse, and that's it. And that's, I think, there needs to be some kind of like limit of Apocalypse's powers to make him beatable, and I don't think it should be mega obvious. And I think just something as much as like making it his power one set thing and saying like this is his power and this is, because like if you look at all the other mutants, they don't have a million powers. Like, yes, they've got maybe an extra mutation here and there, but like they don't have everything in the way that Apocalypse does. And I think it's kind of a weird thing that the first ever mutant would just happen to evolve to be the best.
I quite like that, and purely only because he's been around he's like 4,000 years old. Maybe he's just mutated and mutated and mutated throughout fleeing persecution for 4,000 years. But I think whatever they do with Apocalypse, like I said, the main thing they need to do is they just need to just don't rush. Yeah. Just don't rush to it.
There's one scene in my rewrite that's like, it's the last. So obviously, like I said, like you've got X-Men 4 and 5 would be the Apocalypse ones. There's a scene in my rewrite that's at the end of episode 3 that is fucking hard as fuck. So in the third film, I'm doing like Days of Future Past, and basically you get like a scene at the end where like after they fixed it and it's been reversed, you get all the guys that are in the future like fighting off the hordes of Sentinels. They all of a sudden just like appear in ancient Egypt, and they're like, "Why the fuck are we in ancient Egypt? Like, what the fuck's happened here?" And they kind of take a walk, and then all of a sudden they see like a statue of like Magneto, a statue of like Angel, and they're like,
"Yeah,
this must mean we've won, right?" But then in their heads they're kind of like, "But why is it ancient Egypt?" And then obviously Apocalypse comes, and Magneto and Angel are like the horsemen, and they're like, "Fuck."
I like that. I do like that. My one main thing for Days of Future Past, for when the MCU adapt it, is for the Sentinels in the future and the present to just not be so fucking clapped.
Yeah.
They were stinking.
I think the future ones are so cool.
No,
they're not Sentinels, but they are a cool design. Like, but they're not Sentinels.
They look like
they're like adaptoids.
They look like the thing that comes to the small town in New Mexico to kill Thor in the first Thor movie, but worse.
That's what it was. I've always said if they do adaptoids in the MCU, they should just be the Days of Future Past Sentinels, because that's essentially what they are. They're adaptoids.
Yeah. But anyway, there we go. We've yapped for, nearly 2 hours. When we include that first wee bit that got cut off because of Chrome. We talked about 10 mutants. We got them all done. And now the next time we're back, we'll have more fun ones, won't we? Some of the most fun.
The next one's the one where I'm like... The next one's the one that's got me gassed.
Yeah. So anyway, now comes the time. Ewan, plug away.
Look, main stage on YouTube, main stage on TikTok. We're pretty busy at the minute because we're like at the best point of festival season. We've got Reading and Leeds coming up. That's like a big thing on the channel. So if you're interested in that, come give us a watch. Big long form video on the channel, and like I said, I'm kind of doing little updates on TikTok, but that's where you can find me.
Sure, well, make sure you get over, subscribe, follow main stage on all of your social media platforms. If you have made it this far, let us know in the comments. Let us know who you think cooked. Let us know any of these casts that you're like actually incorrect, and let us know that we don't know anything about comics and Robert Downey Jr. should play Apocalypse. Tell us that, please.
Let us know if you want the full X-Men Mutant Saga Phase 1 to 3 rewrite story details. We'll go through it. We'll hire animators.
Yeah. It'll just be little Snapchat drawings that we've done.
Yeah, it'll be like...
We've hired animators for the first 2 minutes, and then as soon as we run out of money...
We could do it as like, I'm just reading it to you. It could be like a pitch, right? So you play the role of Feige, and I'm pitching it to you. And you essentially are like, that's hard. And the whole time you just sit there being like, that's hard.
I'll put myself in a little box down the corner, and then every time you say something, I'll be like, chat, what do we think?
It's like a reaction. It's like a reaction video.
Yeah, just me reacting in a little square in the corner.
Yeah, that's
just go, chat, what do we think? I don't know about that one, chat, what do you guys think? Chat, did he cook?
And then who killed who?
Wait a minute, what? And then I'm like hitting the thumbnail pose, I'm like...
You're like, how did Angel die?
We're in ancient Egypt?
You're like, holy shit, Nightcrawler's in ancient Egypt and he sees a statue of Rogue? Why is she dead?
What? I thought Rogue died.
And I'm like, the X-Men are all gassed, and you're like, oh no, I don't know if they should be super gassed like that, chat.
The chat, and it's just Sam and Alfie's apps being like, boys, what the fuck are you talking about? Anyway, if you've made it this far, thank you so much for watching. Subscribe to Jake Talks Cape, subscribe to the main stage, and we will see you next time for more fans casting.